Greetings, my name is Vanessa Svihla, and I'm going to talk about interaction, identity, and innovation in design learning. My research context is a capstone biomedical engineering design course. In this year-long university course, students are expected to apply knowledge gained in prior coursework to solve complex, ill-structured, authentic problems. Students work with industry sponsors in teams of 4 to design particular devices. I was interested to learn how students might learn to become innovative designers. I take design and learning both to be complex, social, collaborative, and emergent processes, and I think this has implications both for the types of data we collect and the types of analyses. Therefore, I conducted both quantitative statistical modeling and qualitative analysis. For the statistical models, I had experts rate early and final design work, and I asked them to rate this independently and found that I had high inter-rater reliability. Experts rated how innovative the work was, as well as how much students had incorporated conceptual knowledge. I also had measures of perspective taking and feasibility from a design skills test designed with the help of some expert engineers. Finally, in order to incorporate interaction into my statistical model, I asked students to complete peer evaluations and interaction surveys. These were completed individually, and students rated particular interactions at different time points in the semester, saying to what extent the meeting had changed their understanding, been productive, or had progress been made. Through social network analysis, I came up with a measure of team cohesion. Team cohesion essentially says how similar is one score to every other score within the team. Thus, a score can have high cohesion, and everyone can agree that the meeting was quite bad or quite good. It doesn't say anything in particular about that aspect. And I'm going to talk to you briefly about this, but I'm going to focus more attention today on case study teams, and I spent about 100 hours with each team. So, in brief, what I found was, from my statistical modeling approach, was that more cohesive teams with higher perspective-taking scores and higher early innovation ratings tended to be rated as producing more innovative designs. But what I'd like to focus on today are the case studies. So I'm going to use a framework introduced by Reed Stevens, in which I look at navigation and accountable disciplinary knowledge. By that term, I mean what counts for this particular context as letting students move forward or make progress towards their degrees or towards becoming an engineer. And the picture you see in the background is a typical sort of mid-coursework problem that a student might be faced with. They would count as this accountable disciplinary knowledge. This looks very different from the types of activities seen in the design studio. However, this still doesn't mean, even when they're doing things like this, that they've really adopted a designerly perspective. Identification is another lens I want to bring to this. And in particular, this is because it's biomedical engineering. About 40% of the students plan to become doctors rather than engineers. Adding information to this is the course professor explaining what it means to be BME. He explains that a BME is a new breed, and he encourages students to be a part of the definition. What emerges is that identification as an engineer is very contingent in this particular context. So I'm going to share 2 cases in brief, and the first is one in which the team is trying to move towards engineering. They are led by Tom, and Tom explains to me about design. He says, there's all these different solution paths, right? There's all these different ways that I can come to a solution. And then there's not even one ending. There's a lot of different places to go, and then even more ways to get there. And so you're trying to choose a path. I see this as a very sophisticated understanding of design, yet he had a lot of difficulty trying to guide his team towards design. They had a particular science problem that, as they were talking about it from sort of a theoretical perspective, held them up from making progress. Tom identified this early on And he brought everyone else, including me and the teaching assistant, into this problem space. And at the end of this session, in which he's explained why it's a problem for their design, Cynthia says, "I seriously just learned more than I did in my entire semester of physics." Cynthia's role often involves invoking customer needs and the practical requirements of the sponsor. She tells me that she thinks her role isn't very important, yet Tom tells me that he knows the need to follow her. He sees her contributions as critically important. At the end, when they are finally able to make this device, they can't actually make this scientific problem happen. And so they finally, when prototyping, shift to this more designerly perspective. One of the other teammates explains, "It's a shame that this class is the first course I've ever taken in my almost 5 years here, where I've thought that I know what a biomedical engineer is, and I wouldn't mind being one." And I see this as problematic. And the fact that they had a sense of what design was and still had such a struggle shifting into this kind of designerly accountable disciplinary knowledge, I think might be attributable to some extent to the emphasis of more of a scientific over designerly accountable knowledge earlier in the coursework. But imagine if a team doesn't want to move towards engineering. So Steve, the team leader, is very charismatic, and he has ties to the Animal Research Center. And so when they have the opportunity, Tom manages to get this the situation in which the team are actually doing animal testing, and they're looking at kind of sensor measure something. But Daniela says, "Something bothers me. The fact that we're putting the sensor on the stomach during surgery." And the reason it bothers her, she says, "Should we think about leaving the sensor?" But Steve dismisses that and says, "Are you talking about in real life?" Daniela indicates that yes, in fact, she's keeping in mind this use, the customer involved. And she says, "Yeah, so like using it." Steve doesn't understand why he's getting pushback from his teammate and from the teaching assistant. And he says, "I mean, like a surgical procedure? I mean, that's not considered any sort of technical, like something nobody else has even ventured to do in this course?" But Daniela reminds him, "Well, we're not designing anything." Worried by the progress this team is making, the course professor meets with the team, and he emphasizes to them that the question is, what can you really uniquely contribute as an engineer? Somebody across the street, this brilliant life scientist, is not going to be able to put on the table. In the end, although they were able to complete a design, it wasn't really very designerly, and the students felt that the design components were simply tasks or hoop jumping involved. They didn't see it as integral to what they were really learning. So, just a few concluding thoughts about this, kind of bringing these things together. In the statistical model, I found that design skills plus measures of interaction, in this case cohesion, were able to account for variance and innovation. In looking at the differences between teams, the interactions were definitely relevant in trying to understand whether teams' designs were innovative or not, or at least whether they were seen by experts as being innovative. In the former team, their innovation was heightened by their willingness to try to become designers, and it was hindered in the latter team by conceptualizing the design aspects as simple things to cross off a list, much as any other task. It didn't imbue the activity with a designerly perspective. So, in sum, it's challenging to adopt these designerly accountable disciplinary knowledge perspectives even when a team wants to. And when a team leader in particular doesn't want to, there is a risk, especially when underrepresented minority members are serving in non-leadership roles. And if they're the ones who are trying to promote designerly perspectives, there's a risk when we see this intersection of these two different identifications, of wanting to be an engineer in a context that is both feeding into engineering and medicine. So thank you very much for listening today.